Alright, so we're going to start Chapter 6, which is statistics. Chapter 6 is a little taste of statistics. So the very first thing that you usually learn in a statistics class is measures of central tendency, which are mean, median, and mode. And again, somewhere along the line, in your history of mathematics, you should have seen mean, median, and mode. Mean, better known by the population as average. Whenever somebody talks to you about an average, or whenever you find your average test score, again, whenever the term average is used, that's the same as the term mean. Mean and average are the same thing. The mean is the average of a set of values, numerical values. So it's the sum of the numbers in your set divided by how many numbers you have. The shorthand notation for this is, so this kind of U looking symbol here is the Greek letter for the mean. Mu, it's called mu, it's the mean. This notation is the sum of all the numbers, and n represents how many numbers you have. So if I add up 10 numbers together, n would represent 10. And again, up top would be actually physically going through and adding up all 10 numerical values. Alright, so that's mean, average. Again, it's the average of my set of numbers. Median. Median is found when you take your numbers and you put them in some order. Usually we go low to high, but technically you could go high to low as well. And it's basically the number that lands smack dab in the middle of the set. Alright, so if you have an odd set, there's just one number in the middle. Alright, one of the numbers is the middle value. If you have an even set, meaning you've got an even number of numbers, you have to take the average. There's going to be two middle value, and you just take the average of those two middle values, and we'll look at examples of both cases. Alright, so median, the middlemost number in your data set. Mode is whatever data value occurs the most often. And you can have, again, all of our examples will have one mode, but you could technically have one mode, two mode, or no modes. If two numbers show up the same amount of times, then there'd be two modes. If all of the numbers show up once, there's no mode in that case, because no number shows up more often than the others. All right, but all of our examples will have, when we ask you for mode, there'll be a specific mode that we'll go over. So it'll be just like the problems in the set of notes. All right, so an example, the first example. All right, find the mean, median, and mode for this set of test scores. So here's my set. All right, so the test scores were 80, 72, 90, 68, and 80. All right, so the mean, which would be the average test score, you take the sum of all the values, so you add them up. You take your 80 plus your 72 plus your 90 plus your 68 plus your 80, and you would divide that by how many there are. Well, there are 5 numbers there, so you divide by 5. And so when you find your mean, which is that mu symbol, it's the sum of all of the values, divide by 5. Alright, so when you add them all up, you divide by 5, and so that comes out to 78 would be the average. 78 would be the average. That's the mean. Right? Mean is 78. Alright, mode is the next one that's easy. We'll come back to median in a second. I'm going to go ahead and find the mode. Alright, mode is the number that shows up the most often. Well, there's only one number that shows up twice. Every other number shows up once. So 80 shows up twice. Everybody else just shows up one time. So 80 would be the mode. Alright, now for the median. The median, you have to remember, organize the number in an ordered list, meaning you have to list them low to high or high to low. We typically go low to high just because it's easier to always do the same thing. Alright, so when we do the median, we have to order the values. Alright, so I typically go low to high, and that's what I'll always do. Alright, so the lowest number is 68. The next number is 72. Then my 80s, and you write both of them down, 80 and 80. And then 90, and then you kind of check, make sure I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. There should be 5 numbers there. So this is an odd set, meaning there's one number smack dab in the middle. The one number smack dab in the middle is 80. And the check that you've picked the right numbers, there should be the same number of values above it as there are below. There are 2 numbers below 80, and there are 2 numbers above 80, and so that's the middle most number, and so that's the median. So that's an example of the odd set. So now when we have an even set of numbers, all right, so we have the following ages of employees shown below. So those are the ages listed of my employees, of an employee set. Find the mean, median, and mode. Again, we'll start with the mean 2, which would be the average age. Alright, so remember the mean is the sum of all of the x values divided by n. And so the sum, you add up all of those values. So you take your 50 plus your 38 plus your 42 plus your 40 plus your 45 plus your 56 plus your 50. And when you add them all up, those add up to be 376. And then you divide by how many there are. There are 8, so you're going to divide by 8. And so the mean is 376 divided by 8. And so 47 is the average age. All right, for this particular group, the average age is 47. All right, mode, again, I'm going to go ahead and find the mode because I think mode is pretty easy. All right, mode is the number, so the age that shows up the most often. All right, the age that shows up the most often. Well, there's only one age that shows up twice, 50. All of the rest of them just show up one time, and so 50 is the mode. All right, the median is the one where you have to do a little bit of work. All right, so the median. First, you have to order your list. So write them in order. I go low to high. You could go high to low. It should, again, the middle number should be in middle no matter how you organize it. All right, so the lowest number is 38. The next lowest is 40, then 42, 45, both 50s, and you write both of them down. 55 and 56, and then do a quick count to make sure you haven't missed anybody. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 of them. All right, so there are 8, which means there are 4. So if I go in, there's 4. So again, what you do is you kind of go in, and this time there are 2 middle values. All right, there's not a single middle number. There are 2 middle values, so that's what we mean by there are 2 middle values. And actually, with the number in between those two is what we want. That's going to be the median. So that's where we find the average of the 2 middle values. So there's 2 middle values because you have to have the same number of values above as below. So I can't pick 45, because if I picked 45, there'd be 3 numbers below and 4 numbers above. That wouldn't work. I can't pick 50, because there'd be 3 numbers above and 4 numbers below. Right? You have to have the equal number. So both of those are in the middle. And then I have to average them to get my median, because again, they're both in the middle, means they have the same number above as they do below. There's 3 below 45 and 3 above 50. And so to find the median, you got to take the average of the two, and what you do is you add them up. You find the middle value between the two. You add them up and divide by 2. So you take your 45, your 2 values in the middle, and divide by 2. All right, 45 plus 50 divided by 2 is 47.5. 47.5 is smack dab in the middle of 45 and 50, and so that's my median. 47.5. All right, let's look at the next example. All right, so quick before we get to the next example, we're just going to briefly talk about outliers. Outliers should be, again, they're fairly obvious. They're numbers that lie outside of the majority of our numbers. All right, and they do influence our statistical information. Right, this is statistical information. Where they have the greatest influence is on the average. All right, that's why we like to have all 3 sets, because it's important to kind of understand how the set works. So the average would be averaging all my values. So if I have an outlier, the average typically is greatly affected by my outlier. The median is typically not, because the median is the middlemost number. The outliers tend to land on the edges, so they land on the way above or way below. And so the median's not affected by that outlier. So that's why, again, it's helpful to know both pieces of information to kind of know, did I have an outlier and did it affect my overall average? All right, and we're going to look at an example of that. All right, so find the mean and median. All right, there's no modes in these cases, so we're just finding the median. All right, so for this set of information, we'll find the mean, all right, which is the sum of all my values divided by how many we have. And so we'd add up all of these values, find the sum of them. So add the 95, the 98, the 89, 92. You'll notice 12 is sort of the oddball, right? 12 would be the outlier. So if suppose this were a set of test scores. All the test scores are landing near the A range, and then there's one anomaly. There's a 12. All right, there's a test score that, again, you completely bombed on. And so it would be an outlier, and it would greatly affect the average. Or that 12 would greatly affect the average. All right, so when we add up those scores, it comes out to 386, and there are 5 of them, so we divide by 5. So 386 divided by 5, which means the average is a 77.2. And you'll notice most of the test scores are high, but the average came out pretty low. So again, if we're talking about this in terms of tests, almost all of the test scores were A's. except for two. There was one that was slightly below an A and one that was slightly low. But when you averaged them out, the average came out to a C. All right, well below A, because that outlier affected my average. All right, my median. So let's look at the median. Remember, for the median, we have to organize the set of scores. So 12 is the lowest, then 89. All right, then 92, 95, and 98. So there's, again, odd numbers. So there are a single middle value. 92 has two numbers above it and two numbers below it. And so that's my median. So median is a 92, which is probably a better tell in this case of what the numbers represent. All right, it's the middlemost number, which is 92. All right, then the average in this case, because the outlier really throws us off. All right, so what if we, suppose this were test grades and we drop your low. So somebody took tests, were happy with their scores, and didn't really study for the last test because they knew it was going to get dropped. All right, so how does throwing out the 12? So we're going to throw out the 12. We're only going to keep the 95, the 98, the 89, and the 92. So we're only going to keep top 4 scores. How does it change my average, and how does it change the median? And it does change both. One of them it greatly changes, one of them it only changes a little bit. Alright, so the mean would be the sum of all the scores. Alright, that's my mean, sum of all the scores. So we add up those scores, the 95, the 98, the 89, the 92, and this time we divide by 4. Alright, when we do that, the average comes out to be 93.5. Alright, which again is a lot different than the 77.2. And again, that's again represents those 4 numbers. So the 12 greatly affected the average. That 12 really brought the average down. So when we can throw it out, our average goes up. Well, let's check the median. Alright, so the median, we have to organize our information. So lowest now is 89, 92, 95, 98. So this one again is an even set, so there are 2 middle numbers. The 2 middle numbers are the 92 and the 95. Right, I can't pick 92 because there would be 2 numbers bigger than it, 1 number less than it. They're not the same. I can't pick 95. There would be 1 number bigger than it. Again, I have to have the same set of numbers above and below. And so those would be the middle number. And again, I want to find the value smack dab between them. And so the median would be the average of the 92, the middle value between 92 and 95. So 92 plus 95 divided by 2 is how we find it. And as it turns out, it also comes out to 93.5. So our median is, and sometimes that happens. It doesn't always happen, but occasionally it does. All right. It did change the median, but it didn't change the median by much, right? The previous median was 92. When we dropped the outlier, it became 93.5. All right. So again, the median in this case was the better tell, because the outlier really affects the average. All right. Well, what if we want to find average, mean, median, and mode? So mean would be my average. Mean, median, and mode of a table of information. We're given, instead of just listing out the information, they organized it in a table because we have a lot of numbers that showed up the same. We tallied them in a table. Alright, so the following example is a table. So we have the ages. So the ages 15, 16, 17, 18. That's how old people are of the students. And how many of them land in that group. So that means there's one 15-year-old, one 15-year-old, two 16-year-olds, three 17-year-olds, and two 18-year-olds. How do we find the mean, median, and mode when we're given a table of information? Well, mean is found by taking all of my numbers and adding them up and then dividing by the total. And so the total would be if we take how many total students? Total students. Well, there is 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus another 2. So that's 8. There are 8 total students altogether. Right? So there are 8 values that I would add up when I take my mean. When you have a table, what this represents is there are one 15-year-old, two 16-year-olds, three 17-year-olds, and two 18-year-olds. And so when you go add them up, you keep that in mind. I have one 15-year-old, so 1 times 15. Then I add the next set. I have two 16-year-olds, right? 2 times 16 represents there were two 16-year-olds. Then I have three 17-year-olds, so take 3 times 17 because there's 3 of them. And two 18-year-olds, so 2 times 18. Again, those would represent, if I listed them out, it would represent 15, 2 16s, 3 17s, and 2 18s all add up. There would be 8 numbers there because there are 8 numbers altogether. And so we divide that by 8. So first thing I'm going to do is simplify the top. So when you multiply out and add, the top adds up to be 134. Divide by 8. And so the mean age comes out to 16.75 is the average age in this particular group of students. 16.75. So between 16 and 17-year-old is the average age. All right, now mode. Again, mode typically is easy. It's which group had the most. 17, right? There were 3 17-year-olds. There were only 2 18-year-olds, 2 16-year-olds, and 1 15-year-old. And so mode was 17. There were the most people at this class were 17, because there were 3 of them. All right, median. Median is always the hard one. All right, median's the one that's always the tricky one. All right, so I'm actually going to erase my sets here. Since the numbers are fairly small, you could list them out if you wanted to. All right, but there's 8 of them, so that means it's an even number. And so I need to have so that means there will be 2 numbers in the middle, and I need to figure out my 2 values. Well, if I'd listed them out, there would be 2 numbers in the middle, which means there would be 3 above and 3 below. So I have to figure out where the 3 would land. As it would turn out, there's 3 there, and there would be 3 there, right, because I would count the 17-year-old, and so 17 would turn out to be my median. All right, now, to sort of visualize how the median is 17, I'm actually going to list them so you can see the list. So there's 1 15-year-old, so we write down 1 15, 2 16-year-olds, so we do 2 16s, 3 17-year-olds, so 17, 17, 17, and then 2 18-year-olds. This would be, again, if you added those up, that would add up to the 134. You'll see 3 below, 3 above would put me into the 17 group, right? Because there's the 3 students that were 15 and 16. There were the 2 students that were 18, which means the 3rd student would land in the 17 group. And so 17... well, if you try to find the middle value of 17, it would be 17 plus 17 divided by 2, which comes out to be 17. Alright, and so the median in this case was 17. And so that was one where you could actually list them out if you wanted to. The next table example is a case where you can't. So you kind of have to figure it out based on what you're given. Alright, so the last example for this particular video is another table. This one's a bigger table, though. I don't want to list this one out because, again, the numbers are so large. So we have a class of high school students. This is a much bigger class. We asked how old they were. So the ages are the same, 15, 16, 17, and 18. This time, though, there were 110 15-year-olds, 250 16-year-olds, 105 17-year-olds, and 135 18-year-olds. Find the mean, median, and O. So again, I'm going to find the mean first. The mean would be the average. And so you add up all of those. And so the first thing I'm going to find is my total, so I know what to divide by. Alright, total. We're going to add up all of these. So you add the 110, the 250, the 105, the 135. So there's a total 600 students. Alright, so that's what we're going to divide by. When you add them up, I know that there is 110 15-year-olds. So you take 110 times 15. Plus, there are 250 16-year-olds. So 250 of them are 16. Plus 105 17-year-olds. So you take 105 times 17 plus 135 18-year-olds. And then you're going to take that number and divide it by 16. Sorry, divided by 600, not 16. Because there's 600 people represented there. 15, there are 110 of them. 16, there are 250 of them. 17, there were 105 of them. 18, there were 135 of them. Alright, so I'm going to simplify the up top first. So I'm going to add up the up top, and it's going to be a fairly big number when I add the up top together. It comes out to be 9,865, which I'm going to divide that by 600 students. And so the average age is 16.44 would be the average age. So that's the mean. Alright, mode again is pretty easy too. You just look at the group that had the highest number. So there were 110 15-year-olds, 250 16, 105 17, and so the 16-year-old would be the mode. Alright, That would be the most. There's the most students were 16 years old. Again, the median is the hard one. All right, and this one we don't want to list it out. So you kind of have to logic your way through. All right, now there is an even number, but if we split it in half, there would be 300, 299 above, 299 below is what we want. So I'm just going to do 300. So where does the 300, right? If we split this in half, 300 would be half the students. So that would be in the middle almost. And so we need to figure out what the 300 is on both ends. And so if I move up, these two numbers add up to be 360, right? These two numbers add up to be 240, which means the 300 from both ends lands into the 16-year-old group, right? If I go in here, the 300 will land here, and the 300 will land there. And so 16 is the median, right? It's the middlemost value is 16, because they're all 16 in the middle there. All right, and that one's a little tougher. There is a way to do this on calculators, and if you know how to do it on your calculator, feel free, but it is also good to know how to do it by hand. But if you know how to find the mean, median, well, actually mode is not, there's no mode in the calculator, but mean and median, there are ways to do it on scientific calculators, and so if you know how to do that on your scientific calculator, you can feel free to check the answers there as well. But try them by hand a few times to see if you can't get them by hand. We'll stop there. We'll pick up the next set, which is using average to figure out what I need. All right, so I'm going to stop there.